Hi, welcome to the Carmichael Workshop. I'm Steve, and this is my entry for the 2014 Summers Woodworking 2x4 competition. I'm going to make a guitar out of this 8-foot 2x4. I'm going to use these templates to create an acoustic version of a full-size Fender Telecaster. If you want to try this and you need templates, just Google it and you'll find some. I'm going to start by making the neck out of this clean section of 2x4 that has no knots. Since I'm limited to one 8-foot 2x4, I'm going to keep all my scrap in this bucket because I think I'm going to need it later. It'll be interesting to see how much wood is left in this bucket by the end of the project. I'm going to trace the body onto this piece of plywood, and then I'm going to cut some 2x4 pieces that are going to make up the sides of the body. I've cut all the blocks that I need to make up the sides of the guitar body. So now I just need to glue these up, and I'm going to leave one area here without any glue on it so that I can get my bandsaw on the inside and cut away some of this extra material. To cover the top side and the back side of the guitar, I'm going to resaw my last chunk of 2x4 and whatever's in my scrap bucket over on my table saw and my bandsaw. I picked out the main centerpiece that I want to use for the top of the guitar, but before I glue it on, I want to cut out the sound hole over here on my scroll saw. Alright, I've got all the boards for the guitar body glued together, so the next thing I need to do is trace my template onto the body blank so that I can cut it out. I've got the template for routing off the neck pocket clamped tightly to the body and in the right place. And the standard for routing out a neck pocket for a Telecaster is to route it at 5/8 of an inch deep. Well, the pocket came out pretty good, and after a little bit of finessing with the chisel, I got a nice tight fit between the neck and the guitar body. I need to cut an 1/8 inch slot at the end of the fretboard to receive the nut. Since the sides of the neck are tapered, I had to adjust my miter gauge to about 1 degree so that the saw blade will cut the curve perpendicular to the center line of the neck. I cut this nut from a leftover piece of the 2x4, and it's a nice friction fit in that slot. So I've got my strap out here in the shop. So what I want to do is mark the places on my wooden nut where the strings need to pass over. If you're building a guitar, it helps to have a guitar on hand that you can use as a guide. I'm just going to cut the little slots for the strings on my scroll saw. I'm not going to glue this in because if it doesn't work out, then I can just cut another one and put it in the slot. Now that I've got the nut in place, I need to get the frets onto the fretboard of the neck. And there's a website called stumac.com, and they sell a lot of guitar parts, but they also have information about guitar building. And they have a calculator that helps you calculate the fret locations based on the scale of guitar you're making. Now, this Telecaster has a 25.5 inch scale, so I can show you on my strap that the scale means it's 25.5 inches from the front of the nut here down to the bridge where the strings cross over. And you usually use fret wire to put frets on the guitar, but I went over to Home Depot and walked up and down the hardware aisle, and I found these Cotter Pins, and these are basically folded over thick wire, and it's flat on one side. So what I plan to do is measure the width of the neck at each fret location and cut these cotter pins to size, and since they have a flat side, I can just glue them into place on the neck using epoxy. Since the sides of the neck are tapered, I'm using this bevel gauge to make sure all my lines are straight and parallel with the nut. And I've already marked my locations, so I'm just going to draw a line which is down the center of the fret location. I've got all the frets cut and I filed the sharp edges down with the file. I laid them out on the neck, so let's mix up some epoxy and glue them on. Now I'm going to make the bridge for the guitar, which gets attached here and it holds the strings on this end. I've covered the area with blue tape and I'm going to make the bridge out of this leftover chunk of 2x4. So I need to measure down 25.5 inches from both sides of the nut and make marks here on the blue tape. And then I'm going to draw a straight line, and that will tell me where the strings need to pass over the bridge. Right, I've got the bridge made and I drilled the holes for the 6 strings, and it's going to go about right here. I need to drill a couple holes and attach it with a couple screws. And this slot here is for the bridge that the strings will be stretched over. And it just has a friction fit in that groove. And that way I can remove it and adjust it or replace it if I need to. According to the 2x4 contest rules, we're able to add hardware to our project to make it work. So I've ordered some guitar tuners from CB Giddy Crafter Supply, and I need to drill 5/16 inch holes where the tuning pegs will be mounted. Okay, I've got all the guitar parts made and they're sanded smooth and ready for finishing and assembly. Now when I was a kid, my family would gather around the TV and we would watch Hee Haw with the legendary Buck Owens. And he played that red, white, and blue guitar, and I've always wanted one. So now's my chance. So let's add some color to this guitar, add some clear coats, put it together, and play it. Since this guitar is just a 2x4 and there's no truss rod in the neck, I'm using nylon strings since they apply the least amount of pressure on the neck. Well, here it is, a full-size acoustic Telecaster guitar made from a single 8-foot 2x4. All I used was the 2x4, glue and screws, some cotter pins from the hardware aisle, and I added tuning pegs and strings to make it work. And it sounds good. And I'm really surprised by the neck because it's nice and flat and not bowed at all, especially since it doesn't have a truss rod in it. And it looks great too. So let's check over in the scrap bucket and see what's left over. I've got this cut off from the body. I have about 5 or 6 thin pieces of wood that are left over from resawing. And then all that's left are just a bunch of little tiny pieces of scrap. And that's it. So I'd like to wish all the other contestants good luck. I'd like to thank the sponsors for putting up the prizes. And I'd like to thank Brian over at Summers Woodworking for hosting the contest. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Well, where did my 2x4 go? Why did it leave me in my shop all alone? I searched through Home Depot and thought I found true love. It met my bed saw and it was gone.